Well, good evening. My name is Bill Purcell. I'm the director of the Institute of Politics, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome each of you to the John F. Kennedy Jr. Forum tonight. Tonight's event is entitled Uneven Fairways, Breaking the Color Barrier of Golf. And it's the second in a series of events occurring in the forum in celebration of Black History Month. Our discussion here tonight is inspired by the Golf Channel's documentary Uneven Fairways and panelist Pete McDaniel's book Uneven Lies. At the conclusion of the event, we'll have copies of both the book and the DVD available to you as you exit. Tonight's moderator is Bonnie Newman. Ms. Newman's career spans the public, private, nonprofit, and academic sectors. As a public servant, Ms. Newman was Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Economic Development under President Reagan and served as Assistant for Management and Administration for President George H.W. Bush. In academia, Ms. Newman has served in a wide variety of positions. For us, most importantly, Harvard Kennedy School Executive Dean from 2000 to 2005. Commenting on her service to the Kennedy School, Ms. Newman described it this way, and I quote, "I get to live at home, work at Harvard, visit Washington, and encourage young people to enter into public service." Ms. Newman has also served as interim dean of the Whittemore School of Business and Economics at the University of New Hampshire, and later as the university's interim president until 2007. Ms. Newman is a member of numerous boards and advisory committees, including, most especially for me, a former chairmanship of the Naval Academy's Board of Visitors and as formerly a very active member of the LPGA's Advisory Council. And I wanted to introduce her as a golfer, and she said, "I am an aspiring golfer." An aspiring golfer, Bonnie Newman. Please welcome her home.
Thank you very much, Bill. It's a pleasure to be back here at the Kennedy School. I have always just loved our forum events, and it's going to be quite an evening tonight as we talk about a subject that, at least in my case, is close to my heart, and I hope that Leonard's going to give me some putting tips before the evening's over, because indeed I qualify much more as an aspiring golfer. Leonard, tonight's subject is a fascinating one. I've always had a favorite golf book, Golf in the Kingdom, which is a somewhat metaphysical, if you will, look at the game of golf, and I find it just a very moving and special book. But when I read Pete's book, Uneven Lies, I have to say I now have a new favorite in the golf literature, and I hope that all of you will take an opportunity following tonight's program to pick up a copy of Uneven Lies. It's over here, and I guarantee you that you're not only going to learn a lot about the game of golf and the history of golf, but you're going to learn a lot about American history. Unfortunately, racial relations in the United States has been difficult and painful at times, and I think we'll learn from tonight's film and tonight's discussion that golf was no exception. As a microcosm of life, I think that what Leonard and some of his contemporaries, all pioneers in the United Golf Association, lived through is a lesson that really reflects in large part how this country has struggled with the subject of race relations. Golf, for those of us who play at it, is a very special sport, and I think we can talk about that this evening in the context of the discussion. But what I'd like to do now is turn first to a clip of the film that's been produced by the Golf Channel and Comcast based on Pete's book, Uneven Lies. Then I'll introduce each of our panelists to you, and we'll get the evening's discussion going. Thank you.
There was a time on the professional golf tour when fairways weren't fair, when, as in so many other sports and realms of society, African Americans weren't allowed. So they formed a tour of their own, a tour played on pitted fairways and rock-strewn greens from Cleveland to Charleston. And while there was little money and little fanfare, there was major talent. Golfers who did honor to the game and to themselves. The United Golfers Association wasn't so much a tour as a journey to self-respect, self-reliance, and better times ahead. This is the story of uneven fairways, when African Americans denied a place on the tour, still found a place in the sun.
Started caddying when I was 13 years old to make money, to help my family.
There was a means of surviving, making money. My father didn't bring home but $11 a week during that time, so that was a lot of money, me bringing home $6 the first day, and my mother wanted to know where I got that money from.
Well, I was the best caddy on the golf course, and I always got the best golfers, so.
Yeah, most of the kids taught themselves back then how to play golf. When we got up old enough, we would go to the golf course and caddy, and we would hit the golfers' clubs.
Make 60 cents for 18 holes. I gave my mother the 50 cent and I'd take the dime and buy a cigar.
When I was starting to play golf, most of the guys that played the game were caddies, and I played with the caddies, and I loved the competition.
I walked around caddying with that bag on my shoulder for 18 holes and no shoes.
We never wore golf shoes until we got on the tour. We never knew what golf shoes was.
Them sandal spurs used to eat my feet up. When I got home at night, I took a needle and picked those sandal spurs at the bottom of my feet.
The history of African American golf began in the caddy shacks of America's golf clubs. Every young black man learned the game by watching the swings of others. Such greats as John Shippen, Charlie Sifford, Pete Brown, Ted Rhodes, Jim Thorpe, they all started that way, hoping to earn a living and perhaps leave a legacy.
I started playing when I was 3, taught by my father, and actually it was sort of like growing up on a farm. It was just a grass farm.
I didn't start playing golf until I was 23 years old, and I didn't even know black people played golf, you know. It was amazing the things that we did, you know what I mean? Like if we found a golf club, man, it was nothing for us to go find a tobacco stick and trim it down and make that thing fit, you know what I mean? And you get some epoxy or something and put that thing in there, and you take it out the next day, shit, you had your golf club, man. No grip, no grip or nothing of that nature. You just grabbed it and you hit it.
Never thought about it.
Never even thought about it. I mean, you take one golf ball, the golf ball would be brown as my face, man. And you just play this golf. But you made no difference how far it went. You just went out and played. Now, do you think Tiger Woods would ever know that we used to make golf clubs out of a tobacco stick? That would make a putter from an old hickory dogwood tree?
What we would do is we played in the projects. We made our own golf course, you know, in the projects because we couldn't play on the golf course. And I was a pretty good ball striker before I ever played a round of golf on the golf course.
It was no griping and carrying on about it. It was just a way of life. And I loved it. At that time, I loved it.
Let me say that Uneven Lives will be premiering on the Golf Channel February 11th. Is that correct, Pete?
That sounds about right, yes.
Good. So you can take a break in between all your studying and maybe catch the entire film. Before I introduce the panel, I'm curious, in the audience, can I see a show of hands? How many of you play golf? Own a set? All right, good. Well, that's helpful. Let me introduce my colleagues here on the stage tonight. To my immediate left is Leonard Jones, who we just saw on the screen. Leonard is a native of Dallas, Texas, and is the current resident golf professional at the Sugar Creek Golf and Tennis Center in Atlanta, Georgia. Mr. Jones' professional career has spanned 4 decades including 23 years as a member of the PGA. He won 5 professional tournaments and was inducted into the Prairie View A&M Sports Hall of Fame in 1995, the Texas Black Sports Hall of Fame in 1997, the National Black Golf Hall of Fame in 1998, and the L.G. Pinkston High School Hall of Fame in 1999. Mr. Jones earned a BA in Business Administration from Prairie View A&M University in 1969. In 1997, he established the Leonard Jones Minority Junior Golf Foundation to help increase involvement of young, low-income minorities in the game of golf. Leonard is recognized as a pioneer of the game and a dedicated advocate for the integration of golf. Welcome to Leonard Jones. And to Leonard's left, Bill Fields. Bill was born in the golf capital, I guess, of the United States, Pinehurst, North Carolina, in 1959, and is a 1981 graduate of the School of Journalism at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, where he was sports editor of the Daily Tar Heel. Since 1993, he has been a senior editor at Golf World magazine, golf's oldest news weekly, after earlier stints at Golf Illustrated, the Asheville, North Carolina Citizen, and Athens, Georgia Banner Herald. A 4-time first-place winner in the Golf Writers Association of America's annual writing contest, Bill has covered hundreds of professional tournaments on various tours since becoming a full-time golf journalist in 1984, including more than 80 major championships, and has profiled dozens of golf figures with a particular interest in the game's history. His work also has appeared in Golf Digest, the New York Times, the Best American Sports Writing, and he collaborated with sports psychologist Dr. Richard Koop on the 1993 book, Mind Over Golf. And finally, Pete McDaniel. Pete is a native of Arden, North Carolina, and current resident of Conyers, Georgia, who earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in 1974 from the University of North Carolina at Asheville. A contributing editor for Golf Digest, Pete was a senior writer for Digest and Golf World, a combined 16 years. Pete was sports editor of the Hendersonville Times News for 13 years, where he earned several North Carolina Press Association writing awards. He is a recipient of the Harlem YMCA Black Achiever in Industry Award and the co-author of the late Earl Wood's best-selling book, Training a Tiger. Pete also published a golf instruction book, How I Play Golf. Pete wrote the critically acclaimed Uneven Lies, the heroic story of African Americans in golf, and co-produced the documentary we witnessed this evening, Uneven Fairways. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Pete, if I may, I'd like to get the conversation started this evening by asking you a question. I mentioned earlier, I think the history of race relations in this country has been difficult, painful at times, and I'm curious, what compelled you to chronicle the history of the pioneers that led African Americans into golf in the United States?
I think I was... Somebody trying to call me?
Right? I think that's our internet audience.
Okay. I think I was destined to write this book, to be honest with you. I'm an old caddy. Actually, I'm a shag boy. And for those of you who don't know what a shag boy is, he's kind of a human golden retriever. And basically, you stand out on the golf practice range, and the golfer hits balls to you. You retrieve them, put them in a bag, take them back, dump them out at his feet, and you repeat the process all over again. 11 years old, I started doing that back in North Carolina. And so my roots run very deep. But what compelled me to really be interested in the history of the game as far as African Americans are concerned is a tournament in my hometown, a chitlin circuit event called the Skyview Open. That's where I first saw Charlie Sifford, James Black, Leonard Jones, guys like that who looked like me playing a game that I knew was very difficult. So I knew that they weren't the first ones. There had to be a longer beginning than just these golfers. So that really is what interested me in the history of the game as far as African Americans are concerned.
Leonard, there are folks like Charlie Sifford, John Chippen, Althea Gibson, Renee Powell, Leonard Jones, all of you, pioneers. Walk with us. Let us walk with you. Tell us a little bit about the early days, how you broke in.
Well, I tell you what, it was difficult initially because getting access to tour type, golf courses was difficult. You couldn't play on a lot of facilities. And growing up, I always wanted to play the game, and my mom told me I could play it. My father told me, he said, "Son, no, do something else. There's not any black pros at the time." And but I chose to go with what my mom had said. How most kids are.
Smart man.
Yeah. So I was determined to do it, to play the game, and getting lessons was difficult. Even if you had the money, you couldn't get the good teachers to give you, any lessons. So we more or less helped each other. A lot of the gentlemen that I grew up around that were caddies, I learned to play caddying, followed my older brothers to the golf course and caddying. And like I said, doing the documentary, we made our golf course through the projects. We couldn't play on the golf course, and we used to sneak on the course, every now and then at the country club and hit ball, play one hole, run, and hit a shot, run, pick the ball up. But other than that, we had to make our own golf courses. So I was just determined to play the game. I was fortunate enough to have some mentors, some gentlemen that didn't have the opportunity to play that always encouraged me to do what I wanted to do. And that was real instrumental in me making a decision. But now, looking back, I probably would have done it again, but it was extremely difficult at the time because, you spend your money, you pay your money to enter a tournament, and you can't go practice. You're going to qualify. You got to qualify first of all to get in, then not being able to practice, and you're competing against the best players in the world. It was difficult.
Pete talked a little bit about shagging balls. There's a lot of talk about what happened in the caddy lot. Tell me about the life of caddies and what it did to propel, in this case, young men like yourself, Leonard.
Well, what we did was, you'd always caddy. You're out on the weekends caddying for Anglos, at country club, private clubs. And what we would do is just watch the golfers that were the good players, because a lot of times I would get bagged because I could caddy, fairly well, and I would caddy for the better players at the country club, and just watch their swings and everything. You mimic them more or less. So, and I just happen to have the ability to catch on, just to swing, and just some natural ability actually. And then talking to older guys, what happened in my case was I always had older guys to look up to talk to, and a lot of the guys wanted to play the game, wanted to play it at a competitive level, but they never had the opportunity. Whereas when I was coming along, when it was getting a little bit better. It's not too much better now, but it was better at the time. So we had to, I remember qualifying for wanted to qualify for the state amateur in Texas, and they wouldn't let me qualify. We had to get a petition drawn up in order for me to qualify. I was the city junior champion, and they wouldn't let me qualify for the state amateur. But eventually, once we got the petition done, of course, I was able to do that. But the guys that came before me that had the ability couldn't even do that. Petition wouldn't even have done any good at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the shameful thing, in my research, and going all the way back to John Shippen, who in 1899, I think it was, at Shinnecock Hills, the second U.S. Open, a 16-year-old caddy was the best player at Shinnecock Hills, and the U.S. Open was being contested there for the second time, and the membership decided that they wanted him to play and represent the club. Well, most of the players were Europeans, and they did not want to see this young man, this young minority, play in this golf tournament. So they pretty much petitioned to keep him out of the field. Well, Theodore Habermeyer, who was the president of the USGA, excuse me, the ruling body of golf back then, said this guy's going to play along with a Native American named Oscar Bunn if you guys don't play. This 16-year-old caddy wound up leading the first round of the U.S. Open. Finished, I think, tied for 5th, but stories like that are throughout the history, throughout the history of African Americans in golf. Caddies wanting to play, not being allowed to play, caddying at a country club, being influenced by people of power, wanting some of that power, and not being able to apply their trade and chase their dream, it was a tragedy. Leonard lived through it. I've lived through it. Bill has chronicled it. And that's why we hold out a lot of hope today because of young people like you, who I think are instruments of change, and that's what we're hoping,
Leonard was talking about players that came before him that didn't have even the chance that he had, as difficult as it was, in the 60s, let's say, for Leonard. But yeah, it goes way back. In the 40s, a man named Bill Spiller out in California, he was really the first black professional to challenge authority and try to gain entry into a PGA Tour event. It was in 1948 in the Oakland, California area, and that really was the start of the drive to get access to the tour that culminated in 1961 when the Caucasian only, as bad as that sounds, that's what the clause that existed prior to 1961 with the PGA. And when that was finally lifted, then it did open the door in a more formal way for guys to join the tour.
Expand upon that a bit, Bill. I have to admit that until I read Pete's book, I hadn't realized that the PGA actually had a clause in its bylaws limiting membership and play on the tour to white Caucasian males.
Males, yes.
Males.
That's right. It did, as bizarre as it sounds today. It did until 1961, and guys, Bill Spiller was instrumental in trying to get things changed. So was a gentleman from Nashville named Teddy Rhodes. Joe Louis, the boxer, had a huge influence in the 50s because he was so popular and American from his boxing exploits. He was an American hero, and he was a black man, and he did a lot to sort of change the way people who ran PGA events felt, and it was a slow process, and it culminated when a attorney general in California named Stanley Mosk in 1961 finally basically overthrew the Caucasian-only clause.
Absolutely. And the Caucasian-only clause, it's very interesting, the story as to how it came to be in the first place. There was a light-skinned black man named Dewey Brown who was a golf professional. By the strictest definition of the word, he gave lessons, he made clubs, he landed a job at a golf club in Delaware, and he joined the PGA of America. For 7 years, from 1927 to 1934, he performed all the duties of a professional golfer at a country club. And then in 1934, his membership in the PGA of America was rescinded mysteriously. Well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what happened. Brother Brown was passing for white, and someone dropped a dime on him. Within months of him being kicked out of the PGA of America, the Caucasian-only clause was added to its constitution, which limited play in its events and membership in the organization to white males, which meant that white females couldn't be members of the organization as well.
Let's talk about the role of women. I know that Althea was one of the first African-American golfers on the LPGA Tour. I believe she was followed by Renee Powell, and there really haven't been a whole lot of
There've been 3.
African-American women playing golf either. What's your view there?
There have been 3, and the best kept secret in golf is not the fact that there have only been, I think, in my book I chronicle 19, I think there are 19, maybe 20 African American males who at one time or another have held a PGA Tour card. The dark secret of professional golf is that there have been only 3 women, African American women who have been members of the LPGA. None since Laree Pearl Sugg, and that's been almost, well, over 10 years ago.
That's right,
Close
in the
to
90s.
15 years ago, yeah.
The good news there, again, it's been slow in coming, but last year on the American Junior Golf Association Tour, which is the premier junior tour in America, and it's really the proving ground for young golfers over the last 10 to 15, 20 years, and 3 African-American girls won events last year. And that was really, I don't think that's happened before. A girl named Mariah Stackhouse from Georgia is one of them. And that's big because, you know, you have to start having success early now. The game has gotten so sophisticated that for everybody, that if you don't start out in really organized play at a young age, it's very difficult. Much more difficult than it was even, say, in Leonard's time, when even the white players who had, you know, quote, access, they didn't play, you know, dozens of junior tournaments a year. There was not the gulf between having access and not having access that there is now.
So you see programs like the First Tee, Junior Golf, Girls in Golf is making a big difference as we move forward?
I think there are, and plus, you know, now girls are being exposed to the game more. You know, back during my era, you know, girls didn't really play, wasn't exposed to the game as much as they are now. And then you didn't have as many organizations that are formed now to give them the opportunity to be exposed to the game. Yeah, I think that you'll see a lot of young African-American ladies the next 5, 10 years on the LPGA Tour.
He's a little bit more optimistic than I am. And the reason being that, you know, I've seen a lot of the junior players, and there are some really good ones, but there are a lot more, the numbers are greater among males. And here's a stat that you might want to write down. There has not been an African-American male qualify at tour school for the PGA Tour since Adrian Steele in 1987, I think it was.
It was 85, I believe.
85,
Yeah.
1985.
Yep.
25 years, is that right? Is my math right?
That's right.
25 years. There's something called the qualifying school. It's a tournament, a 6-day tournament that's held every October, November. October, November. And aspiring professionals try to qualify to get their PGA Tour card, which grants them an opportunity to play and compete for the big bucks that you see on TV. Tiger and Phil and all those guys chase the big dollars. All the rest of the guys who operate in the shadows of professional golf are really just plying their trade and biding their time till they get to that stage. Well, 1985, Adrian Steele. And you have only a handful of young black men trying to get their card every year. You have fewer black girls trying to get their LPGA card, and that's why I say it's going to be tough. It is really, it's a conundrum when you think about it.
In Division I golf now, I believe, excluding the historically black colleges, I believe Cheyenne Woods, who is Tiger Woods' niece, she plays at Wake Forest. But, and like Pete said, there's only a handful of African-American men playing Division I college golf now. It's really a numbers game. As Leonard would attest, for every 20 people that get exposed to the game, 4 might really get hooked on it, and of those 4, 1 might have an aptitude for it.
Well,
And
that's true, too.
it's a numbers game. You have to have a lot of people that want to get interested in golf in order to have that feeder pool of people who might actually be good enough and have the drive to succeed.
Well, Bill, I've got to ask, despite his recent issues, I'm surprised that an outstanding kind of once-in-a-lifetime golfer like Tiger Woods hasn't really been more of an inspiration to some of these young people that you're referencing. What do you attribute that to?
Well, I think he has been an inspiration for young people at large, not necessarily African Americans. There's a wave of LPGA players, women who were young girls when Tiger hit the scene in 1997, and Tiger did make golf cool, and he did get people interested in it. But beyond being interested in it, you have to have a consistent way to access the game. In an odd way, in the old days, there were probably 12 African Americans playing on the PGA Tour at one time or another in the 1970s. And now, as Pete said, Tiger Woods is the only one. But back then, black players had access to the game as caddies. They got to play. And if you don't have regular access to courses, it's just very difficult. And Tiger has been an inspiration, and particularly among Asian golfers. Asian golfers seem to really take to the game, and they've, especially in women's golf, it's just been an explosion of talent from the Korean side.
Well, I think he's inspired a lot of youngsters to do it, but as far as African-American males, it's a lot more to it than just being inspired to do it. You've got to have money. It costs so much money now to travel and play the game, and one of the problems we had even back during our day was finding sponsors, getting someone to give you a contract for a couple of years where you've got time to develop and get out and play, and if you make an error, if you're not playing well this year, you don't have to go to work on a regular job. You can still participate, on the tour. That's one of the problems that I find today, just getting sponsors to give you a contract for 4 or 5 years where you can develop into the player you need to become. And if you got a family, you can only play for so long. If you're not making any money, you got to go to work. So that's another thing too. You can be inspired as much as the next person is just having the resources to continue on that journey and have the determination to do it. So I think that we've got to develop some, golf academies for the minorities where they can get the proper training that they need to develop.
If you look at football in this country, if you look at basketball, baseball, think of Jackie Robinson, sports has historically been an equalizer of sorts. And I believe in reading your book, Pete, that was true in golf as well. Tell us all a little bit about the entree you referenced earlier, influence and power. When I think back of recent presidents, many of them played golf, still do play a lot of golf. I worked for a president who couldn't wait on a weekend to get out on the golf course so that he could play a little bit of what we referred to as aerobic golf up in Maine. But there is a lot of power and influence out there, and as folks begin to break through, presumably they're achieving some of that influence as well. So what happens?
Golf is a $75 billion a year industry. It's a pretty big pie. A lot of decisions are made on the golf course. It's a corporate game. I tell my granddaughters, I have 12 grandkids, and I have 9 of them are girls. And I try to tell each one of them that in order to compete with their male counterparts, they're going to have to try to level the playing field. They have to get to the boss's ear. A lot of your corporate executives play golf. If my granddaughter and your grandson are competing for the same job, the president and CEO plays golf. He says, we're going to have a golf outing this Saturday, and I'd like for you, Jane, to come along and play, and you, John, to come along and play. We're not going to discuss business. He's lying to you. He is going to discuss business. and you say, as Jane, well, I don't play golf. So I respectfully decline your offer, sir. You are behind in the game, in the corporate world. That's how much power there is. When I was 12 years old, my second year caddying, what really intrigued me behind those gates at that country club were these Mercedes-Benzes and Rolls-Royces and people of power and influence, and I knew it. I could tell it as a child. First time I saw a money clip. I'd never seen a money clip before. I saw what was referred to as a Detroit, what's it called? A Detroit?
Bankroll.
Detroit bankroll. You know what that is? That's when you take maybe a $50 bill and you have 200 ones or 100 ones, and you wrap that $50 bill around that 100 ones, and you take a rubber band. And these guys were so good at it, they could do it with one hand. They'd flip it like that, and they'd have a roll like this. A Detroit roll is what it was called. I'd seen one of those before, but I'd never seen a money clip. But I knew there was some significance to a money clip, because all of these guys who were dressed in Sansa belts, and that, for those of you who don't know, that was a style back in the day in the 70s, the beltless pants, and these hard-collared shirts had a lot of money, influence over my life. That was a game of golf. That's what it represented to me. It did then, it still does today. Presidential golf. We were talking about that earlier about how a lot of politicians gravitate towards the sport because it's a cerebral game. You have to be a deep thinker, really, to be able to play the game, I believe, well. And that doesn't mean you have to be an intellect, but you have to be able to understand the nuances of the game, and just like you do in the business world, in corporate America. So power and golf go hand in hand. Would you agree with that, Bill? Absolutely. I mean, I've sensed that as a young teenager when I was working as a cart boy at a resort club. It was the people who came there to play golf. They did well, and it was something. It was a sort of a different world, and it was say, hey, I'd like to come somewhere and play golf someday and have a kid put my clubs on the cart. It's eye-opening, and it's. You see things, and like Pete said, you don't have to be that old before you start to recognize things. And sadly, for African Americans, it was not always a pretty picture. It was a disillusioning and sad picture sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Leonard, talk about that. Did you ever think when you started that African American players would break through the glass ceiling of golf?
Well, boy, it's like everything else in life for a black man. You got to fight the whole time, regardless of what it is you're doing. I know my experience in life has been I've had to fight for everything that I've ever gotten, especially in the golf business. So, of course, I felt like someone would break that ceiling because I wanted to be the one to break it. So, we were all trying to do that. It's just that we knew that it was going to be a difficult challenge because we knew from day one wanting to be a golf professional was going to be a task that you had to have a lot of heart. If you didn't have the determination, you couldn't have no quitting in you because, people tell you, well, you can't practice, you can't play out here. I went to tour school 1 year in Louisiana and happened to be at a country club, and we went like a week early and wanted to practice. We all had left the Florida tour to go to tour school, and we went to the country club, and at the white pros playing, we couldn't practice. And they said, well, hey, colors can't play. You can't play out here. I'm saying, wait a minute. We paid our money too. You can't play. And they called the police on us because we wouldn't leave. We wanted to. We said, man, you gonna let these guys play? We all just came from the Goosey tour. He said, well, you can't play. That's the rule. And they actually called the police on us and got us escorted off the golf course. And being a young man and going to this type of thing, you see, you've got to have a lot of I'm talking about stick-to-itness to deal with it. So a lot of good players that didn't want to deal with that type of treatment stopped playing the game. Tiger Woods is a great player, but I can tell you what, I've seen so many guys that play the game as well as Tiger Woods that you wouldn't even believe it. And people say, oh, it can't be true. That's a true statement. I've seen it with my own eyes, you know. So if given the opportunity and given the resources, a lot of young African-American guys that could play the game at that level.
I think what's amazing is, despite all the challenges, Leonard, if you look back at guys who found a way to make it. I mean, say a guy like Calvin Pete, who was on the documentary saying he didn't pick up the game till he was 23. I mean, if anybody wants to see a inspiring story, look up Calvin Pete on the internet. Try to read a little about him. I mean, he was the straightest driver of the golf ball probably the tour has ever seen. I mean, he was incredible. I mean, and the guy was selling cheap jewelry out of the back of a car when he was 20 years old. I mean, the fact that he went on to become one of the most successful players of the 1980s. I mean, the fact that he was able to do that, or the fact that Charlie Sifford was able to really endure the taunts and the harassment that he had to deal with in the 60s. I mean, it's incredible that they were able to, as Leonard said, do what they did when they always knew that a white guy at the gate was going to question them, what are you doing here? You're not a player. Well, yes, I am a player. No, you're not. Yes, I am. I mean, that type of humiliation that they had to deal with, and then go out and try to shoot the same score that the white guy's shooting. Extremely difficult.
It's extremely difficult, and you got to be focused too. I've got so many stories I can tell. I qualified for the Amarillo Open, Hogan Tour event, and went to the gate. It was at a prestigious country club, and of course, they had my name on the sheet at the gate. I said, what's your name? I said, Leonard Jones. They said, oh, Mr. Jones, boy, we're glad to have you here, and the contestant parking is right down there. And make a long story short, I went to the contestant parking. I've got on a suit, tie, looking the part, because we were always taught to. You got to look the part. You got to look like you're a golfer. So anyway, I go to the contestant parking, get out of the car. Guy say, hey, who are you caddying for? Where are you going, son? And I looked at him. I'm saying, what? I'm in contestant parking. Do I look like a caddy? He said, well, what's your name? I said, Leonard Jones. He had the sheet. He said, oh, Mr. Jones, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm saying, well, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. He followed me all the way to the clubhouse. I said, hey, man, just get away from me there. You apologize, that's fine. Go in the clubhouse, and before I could take 5 steps, here comes a security guard. Hey, where you going, boy? I'm saying, man, I got in the gate. I'm in contestant parking. I'm in the clubhouse. You got to know I belong here. At least I would think you would. I told him my name. Long story short, I had it 4 times before I could get to the contest to go get my registration package. I was stopped 4 times at this country club before I could get to the 3rd floor.
Still happens today.
Yeah.
Still happens today, and here's a little known fact, and you guys might be the first that hear this. Most of you may not know this, but I've written Tiger Woods' instruction for years, and I'm kind of I guess you would say, a second cousin type member of the family. To this day, 2010, Tiger Woods, a man of color, still gets death threats. To this day, Charlie Sifford, who is the Jackie Robinson of golf, competed in the Greensboro Open. I'm ashamed to say this, in my home state. And the racial epithets were hurled on him so intensely. The N-word repeatedly. And this man withstood all of that. They kicked his golf ball. If it went in the rough, he was, they had to have security guards around this man. He received death threats. And yet he competed, finished in the top 10 in the tournament. Had to stay, and this is a familiar story about Leonard and guys of that era. Had to stay in a dormitory at a historically black college. Couldn't stay in a hotel. Couldn't eat at a restaurant. And yet they found enough will and intestinal fortitude because they were determined not to be denied. That's what we need from our players today. And Leonard and I have talked about this many times. I mean, young African-American players today who don't understand their history and the pioneers who came before them that forged the way. Tiger, on the documentary, when you see it and watch it in its entirety, you will see how he acknowledges those who came before him. we all owe a debt of gratitude to these people, to these men and women. Althea Gibson was not the only one. Renee Powell. There were many women who sacrificed and had to put up with a lot of crap just because they wanted to play the game of golf. And they're the reason that I'm sitting here today. 2009, I'm covering a golf tournament. Now, there aren't very many of me in professional golf. As a matter of fact, there's, what, 2, I think, maybe in the world, African Americans who are golf writers at major publications.
Pharrell Evans at Sports Illustrated.
That's exactly right. There's 3 of us, I think. I'm covering a golf tournament again in my home state. I'm inside the ropes because that's my job. I cover Tiger Woods, and I'm accosted by one of the officials who didn't believe that I was on my job, who I said I was. Standing right next to me was one of my white colleagues. We're both under the ropes, inside the ropes, standing right next to me. 2009. Credentials around my neck. He had his around his neck. The official accosts me. 2009. The level playing field isn't so level after all. And that's the thing that I admire so much about Leonard and people like him. Charlie Sifford, Bill Spiller, Teddy Rhodes, who might have been the greatest player. Who knows, had he been given the opportunity? There's a guy who won 150 golf tournaments, most of them on the UGA, the Chitlin Circuit, the Black Golf Tour. But had he been allowed to play on the PGA Tour, he might have won 100 on the PGA Tour. But he couldn't. So that's the message today. You have to respect the people who came before you, and you have to do whatever you can to make sure that the field is level, not only for minorities, but for women as well, because we haven't come really as long a way, baby, as people think we have.
And certainly, leading white golfers along the way back in the day, a lot of them could have done more to help change things. Many of them didn't. Some of them quietly did do what they could. There were some bright spots in that front. Even back in the 1940s, there was a huge tournament in Chicago called the Tam O'Shanter. It was the biggest money tournament of the day, and run by a guy named George S. May. And there was a North Carolina pro, as it happens, Johnny Bulla, who was he was a great golf pro, and he was a great man, and he volunteered to play with one of the black players that was in the field, and he did what he could to make it easier for this fellow. So and Charlie Sifford, when he played Greensboro and he had all the stuff he had to deal with there was a local club pro named Dugan Aycock, who did what he could. It was a hostile environment, but a man like that tried to help.
Absolutely.
But unfortunately, that type benevolence was often overruled by just the times and how people were treated.
How would you characterize the relationship now amongst players when they're walking down the fairway, competing head to head? Does race matter, or is it all about the game?
I feel like it's all about the game, actually. When you're out there competing, of course, I'm sure some of the guys feel like they wouldn't want a black guy to beat them if it's something in a major.
They don't want any guy to beat
them. Right, but it's really about competing. Once you get inside the ropes, you're competing. I think what most professionals have, black professionals have a problem with is the gallery. It's not the golfers themselves, it's the gallery that gives you a hard time, But when you're in between those ropes, it's about competition, and nobody's saying any color, anything. We're just trying to win, trying to shoot the best score you can shoot.
Yeah, it's not black or white, it's green on the PGA Tour. You can believe that.
And if hopefully more African Americans will join the PGA Tour and the LPGA Tour, they're going to find a broad ethnic mix when they get there, because I think this year's Masters, the upcoming Masters, there's close to 50 international players. The most ever will be in the field. Golf has become global, and Asians, South Americans, Europeans, it's a global game now.
Let's talk about the Masters. About 8 weeks from now, we'll all be looking at Augusta and what's happening down there. It wasn't too long ago. Lee Elder Tiger Woods, the first, the
19
only.
Right, 1975. You know, the Masters at Augusta National, one of the most prestigious events in the world. It's a major championship. There are 4 majors in professional golf. There's the Masters, which is the first one held in April, and then you have the U.S. Open and the British Open and the PGA Championship. The Masters was notorious, I guess you would say, among civil rights advocates for an attitude of racial intolerance, whether it was real or perceived. Well, that's a matter of opinion. But the fact is that no black had ever played, it was an invitational. No black had ever been invited to play or qualified to play until 1975 when Lee Elder, who's one of the most famous African-American golfers, qualified and broke that racial barrier. And I would venture to say, since then, there's only been, let's see, there's been Jim Thorpe, there's been Calvin Pete, and Tiger Woods.
Well, actually,
Jim Dent, maybe.
you know, a lot of guys were qualified to play. They changed the rules every time one of them qualified to play. Whenever somebody met the qualifications, they would change the rules. You know, Charlie, Pete Brown should have played in. But actually, Pete should have been the first one to play.
Yeah.
But they changed the rules every time that one of the African Americans win or abide by the rules. They would change the rules.
And so, this prestigious event, you can imagine what an accomplishment it was in 1997 when Tiger Woods, minority, won it and became the youngest man to do so. I was there, Bill was there. It was quite an emotional experience. You know, when you saw the servants there, and the servants at Augusta National, it's kind of a plantation type atmosphere where you had the servants dressed in white coveralls and black servants attire, most of them African Americans. When he won, they were all standing around the veranda and overlooking the scene, and they were so proud. I'm telling you, I interviewed some of them, including a wine steward who had been there for 50 years. The emotion just spilled over from that huge triumph. It wasn't only a triumph for minorities, though. It was a triumph for all people who really want to tolerate other individuals. And that's what it's all about. You have to have tolerance. And golf, for years and years and years, just didn't have any tolerance at all. Tiger Woods came along, and I believe it to this day. I said it then, and I believe it to this day. I think his mission is not collecting major championships and winning titles, golf tournaments. I think his mission is to bring people together. That may sound a little strange now in light of recent events, but I still believe that is his greater cause and purpose.
I think, Pete, with that image, it may be a good time for us to involve our audience here. One of the wonderful things about the forum here at the Institute of Politics and the Kennedy School is the opportunity for our audience to join with panelists in discussing these topics. So the floor is open. Those of you who have attended forum events in the past know the rules. Please identify yourselves, have a question. This is not open mic. This is an opportunity for us to learn from one another. There are microphones located throughout the room, and don't be shy. Sir, could you go to the microphone? Because we do have, in addition to those gathered here this evening, we have another group of people in cyberspace who are watching a live streaming video of tonight's proceedings.
Hi. Is this on?
Yes.
I'm Jonathan DePina, and I have a question for the panel. We're talking about African American players and minority players, But one of the things I noticed as a golfer in the game, and I came up as a caddy as well, is there aren't very many minority caddies out there. And I've walked into many country clubs to play golf, and I don't see many caddies at all these days. I mean, people are riding in golf carts, but the places that I do see caddies, there aren't minorities there. So I'm wondering what you think about that.
Well, they've got a caddies association now, and at a lot of private clubs, they've hired the association to bring the caddies in. And most of their caddies are white caddies. You know, there's a few minorities, but not many.
I wonder, maybe Peter Leonard would, do you think African Americans now, young African Americans, that even though obviously a lot of white kids are caddying, do they not want to be a caddy because they dislike this sort of the subservient traditional role, and they just don't, that's just not something they want to do?
I don't think it has anything to do with that. I think it has to do with the fact that caddies, being a caddy was glamorized when the Augusta National, the Masters caddies were on TV. You saw them. They were somewhat of local heroes, and that was during the era when you had a lot of black caddies, and you could earn a fairly decent living as a caddy at a country club. That's no longer the case. And especially among minorities, there's just no attraction there. And I hate to say this, and this may sound terrible coming from someone who has 12 grandkids, but I don't think our young people want to work that hard. Caddying is not easy. You're talking about toting a big golf bag for 5, 6, 7 miles, sometimes in the heat, in the hot sun.
Twice a day.
Twice a day. Some do a double loop, which is 36 holes. And you might earn, well, today you might earn $150, which is a lot of money, but it's a lot of work as well. And there's really no future. And as far as the PGA Tour is concerned, you didn't really ask about that, but is there a black caddy on the PGA Tour when it used to be dominated by black caddies?
Boy, if that, I think, I know a longtime caddy for Duffy Waldorf, his name escapes me, but he seemingly might have been the last one. I don't know if he's still out there. But yeah, I mean, it's gotten obviously bigger bucks out there. Players have gotten, they'll hire a friend who's been a player, a good quality player himself, or a brother-in-law or a brother. I mean, they sort of keep it in the family to a degree. So it's, as you said, John, the whole thing about, there just aren't as many caddies anymore, period.
And another thing, too, minorities have an opportunity to do other jobs now, whereas, back during our era, it wasn't as many jobs, available for youngsters to do. So we opt to caddy, So, but today, kids can work at grocery stores, you got the Walmarts, you've got all type of places where they've got summer jobs that you can work at to earn some money for school or whatever.
Well, I'll tell you this, Tiger Woods caddy, Stevie Williams, has earned maybe about, we estimate, probably about $10 million. He is the wealthiest sportsman in, what is it, New Zealand? Yeah. So, and that's the complaint of a lot of former black caddies. As soon as the money got right, where the players were earning a lot of money and paying the caddies with the potential to make a lot of money, the players started hiring their brothers, brother-in-laws, their high school buddies, their wives, everybody except the black caddy.
I know one exception I just thought of, I remembered Tony Smith, who caddies for Brad Bryant on the Champions Tour.
That's right.
They're very good friends, and Tony's caddied for him for a number of years. I did a column in the magazine a couple years ago about their relationship, because it is so rare now to see on one of the major tours an African-American caddy.
That's true. My man from Freeport, I'm trying to think.
Oh, Freddie Burns? Hal Sutton?
Sutton, he's got a black
Freddie
caddy.
Burns, yeah, that's right. Freddie Burns.
Yeah.
Another question over here.
Hi, thank you all for being here. My name is Alec Barrett. I'm a junior at the college. My question has to do with the perception among youth, African-American youth in particular, but youth in general, that golf is a sport for older people. It's something that even professional athletes like Michael Jordan take up after retiring from their professional sport. Do you feel that that's a problem in encouraging youth to pick up the game of golf?
Bill?
I think it's changing a little bit, thanks to Tiger Woods in large part, who sort of, as I alluded to earlier, he sort of made golf cool, or a bit cooler anyway. The First Tee program, which is a national youth development program with using golf to teach life skills. They call them 9 core values, such as perseverance, respect, integrity, confidence. It's a program not designed to breed competitive golfers, but to use golf as a learning tool for life. And it's been very successful. It's in hundreds, if not thousands hundreds of chapters now. They're making a program called the National School Program that's increasingly exposing kids to golf in their physical education classes in elementary school. And so while it might not have an immediate effect now, in 10 years, if these kids are introduced to golf at least, maybe, in a different way from the way Leonard was introduced to it, but they're at least getting a taste of the game. In 10, 20 years, maybe they'll be golfers, because golf sorely needs a pipeline of golfers, whatever color, because the industry is flat. People aren't taking up the game in record numbers.
And I think exposure is important too, having types of organizations like the First Tee and junior golf programs, that facilities available for the minority kids is really important too, because you got to remember, golf, it's not like football or basketball. You get one ball and everybody in the neighborhood can play football. One ball, everybody can play basketball. You got to have golf balls, golf tees, golf clubs. So it's just difficult, as far as that goes, because it just costs so much money to play the game. That's why it's an elitist game. That's why, growing up myself, they said, well, we can't afford to. My father told me, I can't afford to buy you golf clubs. If you're gonna play, you just gotta do the best you can do. So we've got to get more organizations going for the kids to come to. I think, and give more exposure to them in that way.
I'm sorry. I covered a national kids championship last summer, and it was stunning how sophisticated these kids and their golf savvy parents were in terms of the equipment they had gotten them and the schedules that they kept and the lessons that they took. It was really mind-boggling. 6, 7, 8-year-old kids. Now, one can argue whether it's right or not, or whether these kids are going to turn against golf and hate it in 3 or 4 years, which is entirely possible. But that's the type of kid who's getting involved in golf now, and that's what I said. If you don't get involved early now, you sort of get left behind.
I think you have an influx of young talent on the PGA Tour that I believe will help. I really do. I mean, you have guys like Anthony Kim and Camilo Villegas and good-looking guys who have a little bit of swagger about them, and don't ask me what I know about swagger, but I heard my granddaughter say something about swagger. But apparently it's a cool thing. When Tiger came out, the word was cool. He's making the game cool, and young people would gravitate toward the game of golf, and they did in droves. But as Leonard said so aptly, it's one thing to, aspire to play. It's another to realize what goes into playing and really being a player. It takes a lot of time and commitment. Even the person who plays casually wants to play well enough to gain some enjoyment from the game. And to do that, you have to practice. You have to be able to take your lumps because that's a part of life. I mean, it's really a microcosm of life. And I think young people would benefit. But once golf, if you are destined to play, you'll know it pretty quickly in the process. It'll grab you and you'll want to play. You'll be a golfer for life.
The gentleman that I did the sports psychology book with, Richard Koop, a very smart man from University of North Carolina, a couple years ago, he was telling me how different just the way our society has changed in terms of how he has to teach. People's attention spans are shorter. And for golf, that's not necessarily a good thing. In golf, you have to be focused. Mm-hmm. So if a kid's got a cell phone and an iPod and who knows what else, he may not be sort of developing the mindset to want to go out on a driving range and hit balls for 3 hours. And as Pete knows, and Leonard knows better than me certainly, that's what you have to do.
Absolutely.
It's a solitary pursuit, and it's not for everybody.
One final question.
Thank you all for being here again tonight. My name is Alice Shong, and I'm a freshman with the college. And my question was, I know we've touched upon Tiger Woods a few times tonight, and I was just wondering, I guess given the current situation surrounding him and such, how you feel that will impact how young people view golf, especially young minority people who might have first been drawn to the game of golf because of Tiger Woods.
Pete?
You want to tackle?
Bill?
I'll let them tackle it, and then I'll add my.
Well, I'll allude to a column my editor, Jeff Russell, wrote at my magazine a few weeks ago around Christmas time. He has triplets, and one of his triplets is a young boy, Johnny. And I think Johnny's 6 years old, and his favorite basketball player is Kobe Bryant. And Kobe Bryant, as most everybody knows, had a bit of a stumble, a few years ago. But this young kid doesn't know that. He knows he's a great basketball player, and he got a Kobe jersey for Christmas. So I don't think people are not going to want to get a Tiger red shirt for Christmas because of this. Assuming Tiger comes back and resumes his place in the game, it could be a blip and not a lasting thing.
Well, I feel like everybody makes mistakes in life, so some people will forgive him, some won't, but he'll get over it and come back and probably be the old Tiger again.
I think kids, we could all learn a lesson from kids. Young people have this amazing resilience and this ability to forgive, and we adults could probably learn a little something from them. So in answering your question, I believe Tiger will always be a hero to certain people, and I think he'll be an inspiration for children. As I said earlier, I think that's his mission, to bring people together, and it starts with the kids, because most of us adults, we're on the back now, and we can't be, there's no redemption for us, to be honest. So I believe he'll be just fine, and the nation's youth will be as well.
Great.
Last question. I'm Noelia Rodriguez, and I'm here with the Kennedy School in the Forum Office, and I want to thank you all for your time and for your dedication to a sport that I know very little about other than it looks really cool. But my question centers on something that Mr. Jones said earlier, and then Pete also. You said that 4 times you were stopped on the way to get in to play on that occasion, and then you said just last year you were questioned for obvious reasons that we know. It seems unusual for that to happen, especially since a year ago we inaugurated the first African-American president in this country. My question is, what's it going to take for it to be unusual for that to happen in the future and not have it happen?
Well, that's a great question.
Yeah, it is.
If I live to be 100 years old, not likely, but if I do, I will never understand racism. I will never understand man's inhumanity to other men. I just won't. How a person can look at another person just because they're different and think that they're better than that person. I just won't. So we've been on this earth a few years. I don't know if it's going to change. And I'm normally not a negative person, but I just see too much out and out hatred. I mean, when a person can stand on the Senate floor and call the President of the United States a liar. I'm not saying it was racism, but when we live in a society like that in 2010, I don't know if we've come that far, and I just don't know if it's going to change. And that's as honest an answer as I can give you.
Well, it's really hard to say whether it'll ever change, but I'm an optimist. I feel like it will change eventually. It might not be during my lifetime, just like I never thought that I'd see a black president during my lifetime either. So, and I know that I've always been a believer in God, and He controls the universe. So I think before the end of time, people will. It might be reversal roles, who knows? But I think that we will be to the places where we can live together and see people as people. Not black, not white, not red, not brown, a human being. I think it will happen before the end of time.
The kind of constructive change that I think both Pete and Leonard are talking about grows out of the kinds of discussions and evenings that we've had here. It's really about education, it's about expanding our minds, and it's about leadership here at the Kennedy School, here at Harvard, and at other universities around this country. Hopefully, we are forming the leaders of tomorrow that will effectuate, Noelle, the kind of change that you're talking about so that we will all live in a better world. I want to thank our panelists for their participation tonight. Pete, you've written a fine, fine book.
Thank you.
Bill, journalists are critical for a democracy, and we appreciate what you and your colleagues do, giving us a view into this $75 billion a year industry that's also a wonderful sport, teaching the kind of life and leadership skills that we all depend on. And Leonard, without pioneers like you, where would we be? There would be no Tiger Woods without folks like you and your colleagues that helped to make it all happen. So we're very grateful, and we stand on your shoulders every time we're out. And to our audience, a reminder that Pete's book is available, as well as the DVD of the documentary film. And when you're not studying hard, I hope that you'll take time and read the book and look at the film. Thank you all. Travel safely, stay warm, and watch those snowflakes.
It was snowing?